Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really wading into something pretty significant, a policy proposal that's, well, let's just say it's controversial.
That's putting it mildly.
Right. It has the potential to fundamentally reshape global technology. And we're not just talking Silicon Valley here, but really every country that's kind of in this global tech arms race.
Exactly. We're tackling this proposal floated by economic advisors to mandate a staggering $100,000 fee for every single H-1B skilled worker visa.
$100,000.
To worker. And look, this isn't just a high price tag. You have to see it as almost a declaration of intent. It signals a major shift.
Yeah, it definitely sets up a massive conflict, doesn't it? Right at the heart of, the American economy and our whole global innovation strategy. Because on one side, you've got supporters saying, look, this is vital. We need this to protect American jobs, make sure our own graduates aren't being undercut by, let's say, cheaper foreign labor.
That's the argument you hear.
But then the other side, the critics, they're really sounding the alarm. They're warning this kind of steep tariff on talent could actually be fatal for innovation, especially for those high-growth startups, the ones that really rely on specialized, sometimes niche skills.
Right, the very companies that often drive the next wave of tech. So our mission today, for you listening, is really to provide the blueprint. We need to understand the existing H-1B structure first.
Okay.
Then we'll unpack the mechanics of this proposed $100,000 fee, because it's not just the fee, there's this accompanying wage lottery idea too.
Okay. Didn't realize that part.
Yeah, it's complex.
Yeah.
Then we'll analyze the immediate economic shockwaves this could create, and maybe most importantly, examine the long-term consequences, for global tech competition. We're going deep into how skilled labor immigration works now and how this policy could really define who controls the future of tech power.
Okay, let's definitely unpack this. I think for our audience, people who follow this stuff know the H-1B program is critical. It's like an engine. But the specifics, they sometimes get lost in the broader immigration noise.
That's very true.
So what's the history here? Why was this program even created in the first place?
Right. Well, the H-1B program wasn't some kind of accident. It was actually a very deliberate, proactive piece of policy. It goes back to 1990. Established by the Immigration Act changes of 1990, people often call it IMCT 1990.
Okay, 1990.
And the original intent, it was explicit: drive high-skilled talent to the United States. This was happening right as the technology sector was, just starting its really rapid acceleration.
And the core reason was basically recognizing that the U.S. labor supply, our own workforce, just couldn't keep up with demand for certain skills.
Precisely. Think about the early 90s. That's the dawn of the internet really taking off, high-speed computing becoming a thing. There were these major gaps in labor supply, especially in really specialized technical fields where, frankly, U.S. universities just weren't producing enough graduates yet.
Yeah.
So the program was designed almost like a rapid response mechanism, fill those critical gaps for the national interests.
So it's crucial to understand, we're not talking about like general admin staff or something. This program targets the specialty worker. What does that actually mean? How is it defined?
Yeah, that definition is absolutely key to understanding the H-1B's purpose. It's not an unskilled labor program, not at all. The individual, even for an entry-level H-1B job, has to possess at least a bachelor's degree or higher.
Yeah.
And critically, that degree must be in a field that is specific and required for the job itself. So think software architects, specialized data scientists, certain types of engineers. We're talking about high-skilled, high-level jobs, the kind of roles that directly drive innovation in, core parts of the economy.
Let's talk numbers then, because I think this is where maybe popular perception gets it wrong sometimes. People might assume it's this massive floodgate, but the annual cap is actually pretty tight, right? Making it super competitive.
That is such a critical detail. You're exactly right. The total numbers are, frankly, relatively small for a country the size of the U.S. and the scale of its economy. There's a statutory cap set by law of 65,000 H-1B visas issued each year.
65,000.
And then there's that extra bit you mentioned earlier, the 20,000 carve-out.
Right, for advanced degrees.
Exactly. An additional 20,000 visas are set aside specifically for individuals who hold a U.S. master's degree or higher. It's often called the master's carve-out. And the idea there is to incentivize keeping those high-level graduates from American universities right here.
So add those up.
That brings the total annual cap to 85,000. Now, to give you some perspective on that, the demand, it often runs like 5 times higher than the number of available visas.
Wow.
5 times. Yeah. which means you end up with these lottery selection rates where maybe only 1 in 5 qualified applicants actually gets chosen. It's already a significant bottleneck.
Okay, and talking about costs, the $100,000 proposal is obviously the big headline grabber. But companies aren't getting these visas for free now, are they? What's the sort of existing fee stack look like?
That's a really important distinction, especially for an audience that knows this space. The current cost is considerably more than the sort of couple $1,000s you sometimes hear thrown around. Companies have to pay a whole stack of mandatory fees.
Like what?
Well, there's the ACWIA fee, that's the American Competitiveness and Workforce Improvement Act fee. There's a fraud prevention and detection fee. There's another one, Public Law 114, 113 fee. And depending on the company's size and whether they're considered an H-1B dependent employer, meaning they have a high ratio of H-1B workers, the costs can already easily range from, say, $5,000 up to $15,000, maybe even $20,000 per application.
Okay, so not insignificant already.
Not at all. And that's before you factor in legal fees, which can add thousands more. So this $100,000 proposal, it's being layered on top of this already complex and costly system. It makes it exponentially more restrictive.
Got it. And once a worker gets here on an H-1B, their status is temporary initially, right? But the system is kind of designed to let them stay longer, maybe permanently. How does that work?
Yeah, the visa itself is initially granted for 3 years. It's renewable one time, allowing for a total maximum stay of 6 years under H-1B status. But the key thing is, it's not really meant to be this permanent pool of temporary workers.
Okay.
It's specifically designed, really, as a pipeline, a pathway for this talent to eventually transition to legal permanent residency, getting a green card, usually through employment-based categories like the EB-2 or EB-3. That's the ultimate goal for many, retaining the talent long-term, not just renting it for a few years.
So given this complexity, the cost, the intense competition, who's actually using this program the most right now? Who are the main beneficiaries?
Well, you basically see two distinct groups benefiting most. First, perhaps, obviously, are the massive technology companies. Amazon actually leads the pack there, often using 10,000 or more visas in a year. Then you've got companies like Meta, Google, Microsoft, Apple, the usual suspects.
Right.
But the second group is really critical to understand. The major consultancy companies, IT consulting firms, outsourcing firms, they're often responsible for the highest volume of H-1B usage, using the program to quickly staff up for specialized client contracts.
Interesting. And geographically, where is most of this talent coming from?
India. By far. The sheer volume of highly qualified tech workers coming from India just dominates the program. It really reflects the strength of their technology education system over the last few decades. China's the second largest source country. After that, the numbers drop off pretty significantly.
And here's where it gets, I think, really compelling. This H-1B pipeline, this system, it's actually seeded the absolute top levels of leadership in U.S. innovation today, hasn't it? We're talking about the huge success stories.
Oh, absolutely. That's perhaps the most powerful evidence of the program's original success, or at least its impact. You see it right in the biographies of modern American industry leaders. Sundar Pichai at Alphabet, Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft.
Both came through this route.
Yes, and even someone like Elon Musk, though he initially came as a student, he utilized this kind of immigration pipeline to gain professional status and build his ventures here. The H-1B and the whole immigration framework around it provided the necessary entry points for the people now leading some of the most successful wealth-creating companies in the U.S. today.
Okay, so we have this system. Existing fees staffing up, capped at 85,000 visas annually. Super competitive, but also serving as this vital bridge for future tech leaders. Now, boom, this proposal lands. A mandatory $100,000 fee per worker. This isn't just tweaking the dials. It feels like a radical restructuring.
It absolutely is. It represents a truly fundamental shift in the basic cost of acquiring talent. If the current costs, like we just discussed, factoring in that whole fee stack, run maybe $10,000 to $20,000 at the high end, a $100,000 fee. And let's be clear, this is on top of the existing processing fees. It just makes getting specialized talent exponentially more expensive.
Yeah.
It seems explicitly designed to be, well, almost prohibitive for many.
And you mentioned earlier, this isn't just a standalone fee increase. It's apparently packaged with another proposed rule change.
Yeah.
One that messes with how visas are even awarded in the lottery.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, this sort of dual policy attack.
Right. This is crucial. The goal seems to be twofold. maximize the cost, but also simultaneously prioritize the highest earners among the applicants. So this accompanying rule proposes to fundamentally change the lottery mechanism itself.
How so? Instead of random?
Exactly. Instead of a purely random selection from all qualified applicants, the system would prioritize based on wage tier.
Wage tiers.
Yeah.
Okay, break that down. How would that work? Who gets priority?
So the proposal outlines these wage levels, typically based on prevailing wage data for a given occupation and location. You might have Tier 1, which is the lowest prevailing wage level, going up through maybe Tier 4, the highest prevailing wage level.
Okay.
Under this new system, the lottery would essentially pick winners starting from the highest tier, Tier 4, and work downwards. So if a company really wants to maximize its chance of actually getting one of those precious 85,000 visas,
They have to offer a top-tier salary.
precisely, they not only have to cough up the $100,000 fee to the government, but they also have to offer a salary high enough to place that potential employee into the highest possible wage bracket, Tier 4, just to get the best shot in the lottery.
Wow. That completely flips the economic calculation for companies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They pay the massive government fee, plus they're forced to pay an extremely high tier core salary.
Exactly. It basically forces the math to just not work out for any company that might have been looking at the H-1B program as a way to find, cheaper labor. That argument, whether valid or not, becomes economically impossible.
Right.
When you combine the $100,000 government fee with the mandate to pay a top-tier, highly competitive salary, any incentive to use the program purely for cost savings just evaporates. It's simply no longer financially rational to use H-1B unless that specific talent is absolutely irreplaceable and you're willing to pay top dollar across the board.
Which brings us right to the core argument from the supporters of this plan. Their rationale is exactly that the current program is being exploited, maybe widely, to bring in cheaper labor, and that this undercuts qualified American workers.
That is the direct stated rationale you hear driving this proposal. The claim is that, yes, while some big tech firms pay very well, a significant chunk of H-1B usage, maybe the majority, is dominated by those IT consulting firms. And the argument is they bring in workers who might be lower paid, maybe less experienced, and that this systematically undercuts domestically born U.S. workers, especially, recent grads from U.S. universities.
So the fee and the wage lottery are seen as the hammer needed to stop that.
Exactly. This proposal is viewed by supporters as maybe the only mechanism powerful enough, blunt enough, to completely eliminate that specific competitive dynamic they're concerned about.
Okay, but let's push back on that a bit, just for balance in this deep dive. Is the H-1B program really dominated by cheap labor? Or is that narrative maybe focused too much on, say, a few bad actors, while most visas actually still go to high-wage earners at places like Google or Microsoft?
That's a really important question, and the answer needs some nuance. The critique isn't entirely wrong. There are certainly concerns about specific practices, primarily concentrated in a handful of large IT consulting firms known for moving workers rapidly between different client sites, sometimes at lower wage levels.
Okay.
And those firms do account for a substantial volume of applications. They generate headlines, political frustration, for sure. However, for the big tech companies, the salaries offered are usually already at Tier 3 or Tier 4 levels. They're generally paying high wages already.
So for them, it's less about stopping cheap labor and more just a massive new cost.
For them, yes. Even if they're already paying top dollar, that $100,000 fee is still a significant new overhead cost, a cost that you could argue might otherwise have been invested in R&D or maybe domestic training programs or just hiring more people overall. It's a huge new expense regardless of the wage level.
So, bottom line, the policy is structured as this incredibly powerful, maybe even blunt incentive to hire American by making the alternative just prohibitively expensive.
Precisely. That seems to be the core goal, to force companies, big tech, and everyone else to really prioritize hiring and training recent graduates from U.S. universities instead of looking overseas first. The message feels pretty unequivocal. If you have a budget for talent or training, it needs to be focused domestically now because importing that talent just got vastly more expensive and complicated.
And the timing here feels critical too, right? Given what's happening in the labor market, we've seen tech layoffs, concerns about AI impacting jobs. The market for skilled workers seems to have softened quite a bit.
Absolutely. That context is key. This policy aligns very neatly with a broader political goal, which is often about benefiting domestically born workers, especially at a time when the labor market for skilled tech roles is facing some real pressure, maybe even existential pressure down the line.
Hmm.
You've had significant layoffs in the tech sector, creating this larger pool of often highly skilled, available U.S. workers. And if the argument is that the labor market is softening, partly due to automation and AI, then the question supporters ask is, why should the U.S. continue to import more workers into that softening market? This push feels consistent with the idea of prioritizing citizens when opportunities might be getting scarcer.
Okay, let's shift gears from the why to the what happens next.
Mhm.
You call this fee, accurately, I think, a tariff for labor. And tariffs, well, they always have economic consequences, right? Critics are really hammering this point, that this specific tariff could be an innovation killer, especially for the smaller guys, the startups, the engines of tomorrow's economy.
Yeah, the potential impact on smaller businesses, on startups, it really could be devastating. Think back to the economic history we touched on earlier, those origin stories of today's tech giants. Many started incredibly small, right? Operating on razor-thin budgets, maybe literally working out of a garage.
Like the classic Silicon Valley lore.
Exactly. And maybe they needed just one or two super specialized engineers, people who were maybe irreplaceable for getting that initial product off the ground. Now, they could probably manage the current fees stack, the $10,000 or $15,000, because that specific talent was absolutely essential for the company's survival.
But $100,000, plus being forced into a Tier 4 salary just to compete in the lottery, that basically prices them out of the global talent market completely, doesn't it?
It seems like it would, yes. Completely. If this $100,000 fee plus that mandate to pay top-tier wages just to even be considered seriously in the lottery had been the rule, say, 2 decades ago, you have to wonder how many successful high-tech businesses that exist today, the ones that grew into major employers and wealth creators, simply never would have gotten off the ground.
This policy really acts like a concrete barrier to innovation. It almost certainly slows down progress for any business that needs critical specialized labor, but just doesn't have the massive capital reserves of a Google or an Amazon.
And we need to think beyond just the typical Silicon Valley software startup, right? What about other sectors that rely on specialized H-1B talent?
That's a critical point that often gets lost in the tech-centric discussion. Think about healthcare.
Okay.
Highly specialized doctors, particularly in certain fields, experienced nurses, crucial medical researchers, especially those willing to work in rural or underserved communities where it's hard to attract U.S.-born professionals. Many of them come in via the H-1B program because the domestic supply simply doesn't meet that very specific niche demand.
And defense. Defense contractors, too. They need highly specialized engineers, maybe with security clearances, in fields like avionics, advanced materials, cybersecurity. They also rely heavily on this pipeline to fill critical roles for national security projects. So this $100,000 fee, it imposes a massive new overhead on hospitals, on research universities, on essential national security contractors. It could genuinely threaten the availability of specialized services that are vital to the country.
Let's dig into the economics a bit more. You mentioned the tariff idea. When you impose a tariff that high, it doesn't just shift costs around, right? Economists talk about something called dead weight loss. Can you explain that in this context? What does it mean here?
Right. So a tariff on labor, just like a tariff on imported goods, creates what economists call deadweight loss. And basically, this is economic value that is just lost. It disappears entirely. It's not transferred to the government as revenue. It's not transferred to the domestic worker as higher wages. It just evaporates.
Why does that happen?
It happens because the artificially high price restricts the supply of talent. It forces businesses to make inefficient choices. Maybe they abandon potentially valuable projects altogether because they can't get the right people affordably. Maybe they innovate slower because they don't have the specialized skills. Or maybe they have to use less specialized, less efficient domestic labor for a task, which lowers productivity.
And this hits some industries harder than others.
Absolutely. This kind of loss disproportionately impacts high-growth, really knowledge-intensive industries. Think specialized software, biotech, advanced research, areas where having the exact right talent at the exact right time is absolutely paramount for success. So the country as a whole potentially loses out on the tax revenue, the innovation, the future job creation that would have happened if that business could have just executed its plan efficiently with the best possible talent.
Okay, but let's inject that nuance again about the absolute top-tier talent. We talked about the AI community where salaries are already astronomical. For those folks, The superstars making $500,000 or more. Does this $100,000 fee even register? Is it just a rounding error?
Yeah, for that absolute elite stratum, the world-renowned machine learning researchers, the AI pioneers, you're probably right. Financially speaking, $100,000 on top of a $500,000 or $700,000 salary package, it's absorbed pretty easily by the big players competing for them. It's likely a rounding error in their overall budget for that person.
But
But the fee, especially combined with that wage lottery system we discussed, still has a significant indirect impact, even at the high end.
how does the wage lottery specifically play into the AI arms race?
Well, it acts as a... So companies will have an incentive to artificially inflate the compensation packages they offer to foreign candidates just to meet that threshold and secure the visa slot. This creates this huge upward pressure on salaries for everyone in equivalent roles, including domestic U.S. workers, because the prevailing wage requirements for all similar jobs start to creep up.
So big tech, caught in this AI arms race, they need that talent now. They can't wait to train someone.
Exactly. They don't have the luxury of time. They need that specific, unique AI mind instantly. So they will pay up. They'll pay the $100 K fee. They'll inflate the salary to hit tier 4, which just drives the already crazy cost of top AI talent in Silicon Valley even higher for everybody.
So, okay, let's follow that logic. Even if the policy does succeed in driving up U.S. wages, which is a stated goal of the supporters, it sounds like it does so at the cost of potentially huge inflationary pressure on skilled labor costs overall. Could that backfire? Maybe push companies towards automation even faster?
That's a very real possibility, yes. This extreme cost pressure on specialized human talent creates a powerful secondary incentive. If acquiring and retaining these skilled humans becomes this expensive and difficult, businesses will naturally look for alternatives. And the most obvious alternative is to invest even more heavily and more quickly in automation tools.
Like AI itself.
Like advanced AI, sophisticated robotics, anything that can potentially eliminate the need for those highly specialized, now incredibly expensive human positions entirely. So ironically, the policy could end up accelerating the very future of work disruption jobs being replaced by machines that it might have been, in part, ostensibly trying to manage or mitigate for U.S. workers.
Let's bring it back to the people again. We mentioned Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella earlier. Just as a thought experiment, if this $100,000 fee and wage lottery had been in place back when they were young engineers trying to enter the U.S. professional workforce, would we even be talking about them as CEOs of major American companies today?
It's highly unlikely. Or, at the very least, their path would have been significantly harder, maybe impossible at that early stage. That $100,000 barrier, combined with the high salary requirement, effectively removes the on-ramp for that next generation of potential tech leaders.
Wow.
The ones who don't start out with huge venture capital backing or land a job immediately at a massive established firm that can easily absorb these costs. It seems to fundamentally restrict the opportunity for future entrepreneurs, the very people who might otherwise build the next Google, the next Microsoft, the next major job-creating U.S. corporation right here.
Okay, this massive shift in the U.S. talent landscape inevitably brings us to the global stage. Because if the U.S. suddenly makes acquiring talent exponentially more expensive and complex, well, the global demand for that specialized talent doesn't just vanish, right? It just changes where that demand gets met. What does this $100,000 tariff likely induce on a global scale?
This is probably the most critical long-term consequence to consider. By deliberately decelerating access to certain talent within the U.S. and driving up the cost so dramatically domestically, this policy essentially forces multinational corporations and even smaller ambitious companies to fundamentally rethink their global strategy.
How so?
They are almost compelled to look outside U.S. borders more aggressively, to move their operations, or at least parts of their operations, closer to where the talent pool is readily available and more affordable.
So the logic is, if you can't easily and affordably bring the brilliant engineer from Bangalore or Shanghai to Silicon Valley anymore, you just move the Silicon Valley work to Bangalore or Shanghai.
That's the almost inevitable economic outcome, yes. And look, the research on this is pretty conclusive. Studies have shown consistently that whenever restrictions are placed on H-1B visas in the U.S., even relatively minor restrictions compared to this proposal, it directly induces multinational companies to offshore more vigorously. If acquiring that specialized software developer in the U.S. now comes with an extra $100,000 price tag, plus a mandatory high salary, suddenly, opening a satellite R&D office overseas starts to look like the cheaper, faster, and frankly more rational business decision for many firms.
That sounds almost like a direct subsidy to foreign economies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Who stands to benefit the most from this kind of induced offshoring?
Well, in the medium term, India certainly stands to benefit significantly, given that it's already the dominant source country for H-1B workers. If U.S. firms find it too hard or too expensive to hire those skilled Indian workers and bring them here,
They'll just hire them there.
exactly, they'll open R&D centers, set up specialized programming labs, or simply increase the volume of contract work sent directly to India. This effectively creates high-value, skilled jobs there instead of creating them or keeping them here in the U.S.
But the global competition for this talent is much broader than just India, isn't it? This kind of U.S. restriction must create like a golden opportunity for other developed nations who are actively trying to attract talent.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive opening. Countries that have explicit policies aimed at attracting high-skilled immigrants suddenly gain a huge competitive advantage. Look at Canada, for instance.
What are they doing?
Canada has programs like the Global Skills Strategy. It promises things like expedited work permits, sometimes within just 2 weeks, for certain categories of top global talent. The UK has its Global Talent Visa, often aimed specifically at scientists, researchers, tech entrepreneurs, streamlining their entry process. You see places like Dubai actively positioning themselves as hubs for international finance, tech, and innovation, offering relatively easy visa pathways for skilled professionals and investors.
So they're rolling out the red carpet.
They are aggressively rolling out the red carpet, making it easier and faster precisely at the moment the U.S. appears to be installing these very expensive, very high barricades.
Does this offshoring trend create new strategic risks for U.S. companies too? I'm thinking about things like intellectual property security or maybe just losing the creative spark when teams get split up across continents.
That's definitely the hidden cost, or one of them, of this induced offshoring. When you start fragmenting your core research teams, scattering specialized R&D functions to various international hubs, you inherently increase complexity. Compliance becomes harder. And critically, yes, intellectual property risk goes up. It's just harder to maintain control and security across multiple jurisdictions with different legal systems.
And the synergy?
And you lose that synergy. The magic that can happen when your top researchers, your best engineers, are physically working together in one place, maybe a central U.S. campus, bouncing ideas off each other spontaneously, collaborating in real time, that's often lost or diminished. This loss of sort of research cohesion, that ability for immediate high-frequency collaboration, can itself be a major dampener on truly breakthrough innovation.
Which makes the competitive response from a country like China even more, well, concerning in this context. You mentioned they have a policy that's almost the mirror image of this U.S. proposal.
The contrast is really quite striking, yes. China recently announced a new visa category, the K visa, which became effective, I believe, October 1st. And you can see this as their strategic equivalent to the H-1B visa. But its design philosophy, it's diametrically opposed to the U.S. proposal.
How so? What does the K visa do?
It's designed specifically to streamline the process, to make it easier, faster, less bureaucratic for highly skilled workers to enter the Chinese economy and contribute there.
And who are they targeting with this K visa?
This is the really crucial detail. Reports suggest China is actively targeting highly skilled workers, with a particular emphasis on individuals who have been educated in the United States, graduates from top American colleges and universities.
Wow.
So they're potentially looking to attract the very graduates who might now find it much harder or much more expensive to secure one of those increasingly competitive H-1B slots here in the U.S. They seem to be positioning themselves quite deliberately to capitalize on any brain drain that might result from more restrictive U.S. immigration policies.
So the global perception could become that the U.S. is actively choosing to stifle innovation.
Exactly. While its fiercest economic and technological competitors are literally welcoming that same talent with open arms, it fundamentally challenges the long-held narrative of who leads the global tech economy and where the future of innovation resides. #conclusion.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. Thinking about the long-term impact here. If we look beyond the immediate headlines, the political wins or losses,
Yeah.
what's the ultimate consequence, potentially, of imposing this $100,000 tariff on skilled talent looking out over, say, decades?
Well, the concern, I think, among many economists and tech leaders is that the long-term effects will be a significant and probably measurable damping effect on the pace of innovation within the United States. Innovation isn't some finite resource you can hoard. It really thrives on a constant, diverse influx of brilliant minds, different perspectives, dynamic new business models. By erecting these very expensive, very restrictive barriers, the argument is the U.S. is effectively choosing to slow its own rate of progress. And conversely, this kind of policy could actually end up fostering and accelerating innovation in emerging markets and competitor economies. Why? Because they become the new preferred destinations for that global talent, the new centers for specialized R&D that might otherwise have located here.
And it's important to remember, too, these H-1B visa holders, they aren't just, temporary labor units plugging a gap. They often become part of the fabric of American society, don't they?
They absolutely do. Very often, H-1B holders are the people who go on to start new companies here. They get married here, they buy homes, they raise families, pay taxes, and eventually transition towards permanent residency and citizenship. They become Americans. This policy, by making that initial entry so much harder, restricts the opportunity for those future entrepreneurs, those future community members, the very individuals who often embody that foundational American dream story, from contributing to our future economic vitality and social fabric. It feels like an attack, some would say, on the legal immigration pipeline that has traditionally fueled so much American success.
And given the sheer scale of this proposed change, you mentioned earlier, resistance is already building, even before it's officially implemented.
That's right. We're already seeing reports that a number of major organizations, industry groups, technology associations, think tanks, immigration advocacy groups are actively mobilizing. They're considering, quite seriously, robust legal challenges, litigation, against this potential new policy if it moves forward.
On what grounds?
Well, they likely view it as an enormous hit to national competitiveness, potentially exceeding administrative authority, and fundamentally contrary to the longstanding idea that the U.S. should strive to remain the premier global destination for brilliance and innovation. The fight is likely just beginning.
Ultimately, this whole debate brings us back to that really core philosophical tension, doesn't it? A tension that seems to run through so many economic and social policy discussions today.
It really does. It's that almost unavoidable clash of values. On one hand, you have this powerful traditional American belief.
Mm.
We must attract the best and brightest minds from all over the world because immigration, especially skilled immigration, is the engine of the American dream. It fuels corporate success. It keeps us dynamic.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have the equally powerful belief, especially strong at certain times, that we have an obligation to ensure that Americans, and perhaps existing legal immigrants already here, are genuinely first in line for precious job opportunities, especially when the labor market feels uncertain or is tightening. Both sides are raising valid concerns about jobs, prosperity, and national well-being.
But the global reality today just complicates that domestic tension immensely, doesn't
It
it?
complicates it hugely because the bottom line is talent is global. Capability is global. Brilliance is global. It's not confined to one nation's borders. And organizations, businesses that are looking for the most capable people, which is basically every scaling business on the planet, they will seek that talent wherever they can find it most efficiently.
So friction matters.
Friction matters enormously. The key insight, I think, is that the more friction, the more cost, the more uncertainty you deliberately introduce into the system for acquiring talent in one location, like the U.S., the more quickly global businesses will adapt and optimize their operations to locate key functions outside that system. The world simply doesn't stop innovating just because the U.S. decides to raise its entry price so dramatically.
So as the U.S. contemplates placing this unprecedented $100,000 tariff on bringing the world's best and brightest minds to its shores, maybe here's a final question for you, our listener, to really mull over. With competitor countries like Canada, potentially China, others actively streamlining their processes, offering rapid entry and a welcoming environment to the very specialized talent we might be driving away. How long before the global center of technological gravity, the place where the next big things are invented, actually shifts? Shifts away from the U.S. and towards the countries that are choosing to welcome that talent with open arms.
That really is the long-term stake in this policy decision. And its effects won't be confined just to the tech sector. It touches every part of the modern economy.
Well, thank you for joining us for this really critical deep dive into the future of work, immigration policy, and the global tech economy. This proposal, if it gets enacted, it's clearly more than just a visa fee change. It really could reshape the global landscape for decades to come.
Absolutely. And whether you find yourself supporting the goals behind it or opposing the potential consequences, one thing seems undeniable. The future of work, technology, and global competition is changing incredibly fast. We all need to keep up and understand these forces.
So be sure to follow our analysis here. We'll keep tracking developments because, as we always say, the economy doesn't sleep and neither does opportunity. We'll see you in the next deep dive.